Yo guys, what up, Vman here, and today I will give you the ultimate guide to positioning in Illuvial. Basically all the basic knowledge that you need to know how to position your Illuvials, and a lot of very advanced things that are essentially super simple as well, but you just have to know and have to understand them so you can understand how just like, I don't know, the units move, how positionings play out, and how you just outplay your opponents consistently until, well, they learn after losing to you. So let's just jump into it. So let's look at the standard melee versus melee damage dealer positioning that we have essentially established over the recent months in the Illuvium arena. So what have we figured out? Well, basically, if you have like any amount of random tanks and the other person has any amount of random tanks, usually the damage dealer that arrives at the front line later than the enemy team tends to win if you are essentially arriving at the same side of the front line, right? So how does this look? What does this mean? We see here like the same like random tank setup, One guy is positioning very close to the wall though, and then all the Illuvials very close to each other. So it is a shorter wall than the enemy side has, where there are these small parts in between, but well, Scorpion wouldn't fit anywhere. So the fight would start, right? The Scorpion would walk. Eventually it would probably be here. And at the same time, this Scorpion would walk. Eventually be around here, because it doesn't have to take this path. So it takes this, attacks this Titanor, the Scorpion arrives later, attacks the Scorpion, kills the Scorpion. Scorpion is dead, all the tanks are fighting, everything is mirrored. Scorpion moves on from like killing the Scorpion to then killing the Titanor, the Singe, the Blotto, and so on and so on. So the top side easily wins, like very decisively, deals, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 damage in one swing, right? So you want to be the one in this setup where you both wall off. You want to be the one that has the longer path to the front line, right? So you would, here in this example, because like we don't have a melee damage dealing ranger, right? You could even have way bigger like in between paths, right? Scorpion doesn't fit anywhere, and now, okay, here, well, maybe the Scorpion can't even make it to the front line, so be a bit careful with that you don't just, I don't know, wall in your damage dealer, period. But you can here measure this out and do the perfect one. And then Scorpion would be here. The Scorpion would slightly attack the Titan, or the Scorpion would attack the Scorpion, and then the bottom side could win, right? So if you have this wall thing, you want to be the one that has the longer wall, so that your guy arrives later at the front line. Now, if you also have ranged Illuvials, like the Ophistos here as an example, you don't want the ranged Illuvials to just be here, because then the Scorpion can just take this path and easy, quick to the front line. You want them to be essentially here, so that a Scorpion would have to take this path and then to the front line. And if you have two, you can even do that this way, where the Scorpion now has to walk here, and then can only go to the front line. And the same thing would happen, right? The Scorpion now has a free path, arrives here, even if we would adjust this so that without the ranged Illuvials it would be different, right? Arrives here, arrives earlier than the zigzag running one, kills the enemy Scorpion, then proceeds to kill the entire rest of the enemy team, right? So this is a very simplified example with one damage dealer. Now, what are other things that happen here? Well, if I, for example, would be to break this wall off here. And this is why I personally don't like this like current setup a lot of the times, because well, it's either about, okay, who has built the longer wall, who has positioned slightly better than the other person. Okay, at some point everybody just does the perfect positioning, and then it's awkward, right? Everybody just does the exact same thing, and we're flipping coins. But yeah, what happens if we break this wall here, for example? That would mean that this guy doesn't have something to attack here, so it would walk up front, and then this guy could come in and attack this. This guy probably cannot find the path here, because, well, this is now blocking the own riplet, so this has to take a very long path over here, while this one would already be attacking the enemy, and you could win this like front to back kind of fight at that point, because your guy just started attacking the enemy earlier. Now, if we swap these to, for example, other melee damage dealers, what are other implications that could happen here, right? So usually if you have multiple melee damage dealers, you want them all to be together so they all attack the same target, so they can focus fire one thing down, move on to the next, right? Now if we see this from the wall of perspective, exact same thing is going to happen. Everything is going to walk around to this side, everything is going to walk around to this side. Eventually they will meet at the end of the wall, eventually they will just fight. And the guy that arrives later usually wins, because then you have the better focus fire onto the enemy damage dealers even. But now if the wall is broken up, right, then this oftentimes means that the enemy team has at most of one unit that can maybe, if you break this wall apart like far enough, these are very big units, it's a bit difficult, so you could also just sell some of these units and whatever. But yeah, the principle is you break up the wall here. That means that the enemy tank will move forward and will leave a little bit of space for probably one or two of the enemy damage dealers to also walk up eventually. Now you have all your 3 damage dealers together. They will all focus down this one, whatever at most on this side a tank is or Illuvial is. They will kill that, and then if it's only one enemy damage dealing Illuvial that can make its path through here because you broke the wall, the enemy tanks are still blocking, but not entirely, because instead of being here, it now walks over here, like on the other side of the board. I can't show that. It would be like, but if the Cardulux is here, so we imagine that this Axodon is the enemy Cardulux, right? It would walk around here-ish. And then the enemies here would probably walk around here, while these 3 walk up and they all beat up the Axodon. And then after they beat up the Axodon, the Cardulux, whatever in this case, then they would turn here, kill that. And again, none of your units die usually. And the enemy team doesn't have the triple damage dealer focus fire on this side, so they probably don't even kill the tanks. And you just kill one of the damage dealers and you keep proceeding killing the tanks one by one. That is the main goal. So yeah, that is like the difficult part here. If you both are aware that, well, the longer wall wins. If you don't have the longer wall, you can just open this up, and that makes the late game turns very awkward, because then the late game turns are just like, well, do you build for the longer wall or do you build for your opponent breaking up this wall off? Alright, then the other thing, essentially, if you are versus rogues, if it's only these 2, right? If it's only 2 rogues, for example, they probably can't even kill your damage dealers. So they can just jump here and your behemoths, for example, could win. But now if you have less tanky melee damage dealers that lose 1v1s to rogues, you just want to have like a tank in the back, and then you probably want to have your melee damage dealers just slightly above the tank, so that the rogues jump and they focus the tank, and your melee damage dealers are like trying to run to the front line, but then before they make it far enough, they realize, oh, there's somebody behind me, it's closer, let me turn back and attack. So here you have to be careful to not position them too far in the front. If you have a lot of these melee Illuvials, and depending on how many melee damage dealers and rogues the enemy team has, you could, for example, just place tank Illuvials here, so that your Illuvials have, again, they cannot even walk here, they just have to turn back. Or they have a very, very long path, so the turn back path is quicker. And it's again about blocking the melee Illuvial's path, so that the enemy rogues have time to jump, they attack the tank, and your guys aren't running away throughout the front line yet. They would have to take this long path, and before reaching here, the Vermilion, for example, would be here, so it turns back and goes and kills that. That's like just how you play with those rogues, basically. That's why, yeah, rogues essentially force this positioning of the tank in the back, and the melee damage dealers have to go up a bit if they cannot just face tank them. And then again, it's this positioning thing where it's like, okay, you can buy and sell the rogues and maybe go for your melee damage dealers as well. And yeah, like you play in the rogues, the enemy swaps to this positioning, and then the enemy sells the rogues again, and then they have their triple melee damage dealers. So you have this, no rogue is jumping here. Then these guys are arriving quicker at the front line, and like we can just wall this off here again for purpose of showing, right? So if you would be positioning around the rogues and then your opponent sells the rogues and swaps back to this, you then would be the first to arrive at the front line, and you then would just lose, right? Because your guys would run here, here, here. They would probably focus the whatever tank is here, and the enemy could just focus fire down your dudes. So that is, again, like the mini carry positioning is very, very polarizing, because if you're playing with this one strategy and you're positioning for one strategy, then you either hardcore win or hardcore lose, right? You counter the opponent's strategy with your positioning, hardcore win. You don't counter it, hardcore lose. And there aren't really super neutral positionings you can make. that is one of the things that right now it feels like you can just swap your teams back and forth, and the positioning and the units you play matter more than just having pure strength of more mastery points in play, because these positionings give you such polarizing advantages and disadvantages. Again, Seer attacking Titano, for example, versus enemy Jotun attacking the Seer then, right? And we can extrapolate this with as many units. They all attack the enemy tank and the enemy damage dealer attack your guys. 100 mastery points more or less on augments wouldn't change anything. The team composition, the positioning just matters more in this case. Then another option to play versus rogues if you are on ranged damage dealer especially. Now this doesn't work versus Ramfire for... Oh, actually, it does work versus Ramfire. I will explain that, but then it also doesn't. We'll elaborate on that in a sec. But yeah, you can do something like this, where you have your damage dealers in the corner, and you have the tanks in front of them, and then the enemy rogues will jump, and they can only jump to the tanks, and your damage dealers are super safe from the enemy rogues. That is, yeah, this corner positioning is just super safe, and there's also no big downside if your opponent is swapping between rogues and melee damage dealer, because, well, the melee damage dealer is just going to walk up to the tank as well anyways. There's no trouble for you with that. The trouble in this would be if the enemy team has a lot of AoE damage and AoE stuns. Mainly Titano is a very prime example, that Titano would just wreak havoc through this and just stun all your Illuvials, which does a significant amount of damage and crowd control effect. The same goes for units like Melura or just anything that really targets furthest enemy in an AoE manner, especially in a debuff way as well. Now, why did I say Ramfire can be really good or also cannot be really good versus this? Just take this Alfie out here so I can do this here. So the thing with Ramfire is, this unit is very big, right? And Ramfire is also relatively big, so you can position this like a little bit loosely depending on how many rogues and how big the enemy rogues are. Or you can even position like this. And then the Ramfire, like maybe it can land here, maybe it lands here, depending on where the opponent just positions this. But the Ramfire AoE is not big enough to hit the corner, right? It's just gonna hit the tanks and maybe the first guy in line here, but it won't reach the furthest back unit if you again block the Ramfire from just going super close here. So yeah, the corner thing is just super powerful versus rogues, and the biggest downsides are things like Titano ability, Null ability, Blazer Knight, Fur Knight abilities, all those big AoE crowd control things that can hit the enemy team. Also things like Dual F and Synarth beams, right? Anything that really hits a furthest enemy, Phosphorus, like all the, yeah, just all the AoE abilities in the game, they just hit your entire team. That is bad versus AoE abilities, you wanna split your team apart, right? In fact, we can take Scoriox as a damage dealer example here, right? It has AoE damage auto attacks. So if the enemy team has this setup with a bunch of melee Illuvials, the Scoriox is going to be very powerful because it hits a bunch of melee Illuvials. But what you as an opponent could be doing is you have just one single Illuvial in front of the Scoriox at the beginning of the fight, and the rest of your team is just slightly to the side. Scoriox will just keep attacking that one Illuvial, and it, while your team like walks up here, right, they just meet in the middle of the board somewhere. The Scoriox will just have the one tank in front as the closest Illuvial to attack, and it will keep attacking that, and there's nothing around, so the AoE auto attacks do entirely nothing. So yeah, you have to think about, well, maybe sometimes one tank that's like singled out, so if all the AoE abilities are aimed at that one guy, they still only hit that one guy because nothing else is close by. The same goes for things like Arcane Lynxes, for example, that send out these beams on the Illuvia and everything behind, which, well, if all the mini Illuvials would be together, it probably would hit one Illuvia and maybe one or two next to it, maybe some more Illuvials behind. If it's only this one guy in front of the clump in the corner, it will probably just aim all the AoE here and don't hit the rest of the team. Now, another interesting thing you can do versus these corner positioning options is, especially if they want to stay in this corner. So if one is, for example, playing a empath, a clump option, right? Like they just want to put a bunch of empaths in the corner, and they want that those empaths just keep healing each other, and maybe they do have some tanks in front, maybe they don't, right? Now, if you just put your guys here, they will meet here and they will fight next to the healing. That is bad, right? So versus something like that, you can also, I mean, get rid of all the rogues, right? But yeah, for the sake of just showcasing this, you can just full backline everything, and you can even full backline to the opposing corner. And then they would have to run away, and they're not in range of the healing Illuvials anymore, and then you win. Or they're not in range of the Templar or whatever other AoE buff thing that they want to pull off with the strategy. You can just go full backline, and they run away, and you win. Now, there's something that you can do to prevent this on that empath corner side as well. If you, for example, use Immobile or very high ranged Illuvials. So something you can do is, for example, you have this, this, and this here. Well, they cannot walk past any of these. So the enemy team has to run at you. If you have these immobile Illuvials, or if you have super, super high ranged Illuvials like the Adorius Ador line, right? Because if it has 70 attack range, so you could probably also position this here, and yeah, 70 attack range is just going to reach whatever the enemy has, even if they try to go very, very far away. So that is the way to play these empath corner things, essentially. And yeah, the thing is though, if this backline positioning, you force them to go for these immobile Illuvials, which maybe they don't even want to play. So you just force them into these units, which probably is not the optimal thing for their strategy, but they just have to do it if you position cleverly against them. So I guess the last thing that we can do on the positioning examples is talking about Illuvials that have abilities that target the furthest away enemy. So for example, the Dualef here, right, would target the furthest away enemy. So if we, let's say, have our ranger in this corner, it would target the ranger first, and it would not target this clump first. And then the Dualef is here, would target this first, right? So what do you do about abilities like that? Well, you just want to have one unit in the corner that is like a sacrificial scapegoat, so to say. And then, yeah, you just sacrifice that to the beam ability. It targets the furthest enemy. It's only one unit that's getting hit. And then that ability obviously is still going to happen. It's going to do something, but it's going to have less of an impact. The same example with, for example, Blaze Knight targeting the furthest away enemy, but it's an AoE ability. So even more so, like the Dualef could maybe kill one unit and then it just wastes the ability damage afterwards. The Blaze Knight would send the tornado and stun and attack speed slow either the entire team or only this one guy in this side, right? So if you choose the correct side, or you can also do things like, I mean, just these are like super represented, like just dummy pings to put here, right? These links are just like any random ranged Illuvial. You could also do something like this, where you have the important Illuvials, the important ranged Illuvials in the middle, and then the enemy will, no matter where they place their target furthest enemy, they can never have your middle thing as the furthest. It's always going to be one of the two corners. So that's something you can do there as well. That is very, very powerful. And talking about targeting the corners, if you have melee damage dealers in these kind of scenarios, you don't want them to be in the middle of the board. Melee damage dealer in the middle of the board is gonna be the enemy has the target furthest in this corner or in this corner. They always shoot through the middle. It's only if they have it in the middle where then it would shoot like past the melee guys in the middle. But if they're in the middle 2 out of 3 times, right, left and right, they get hit. And if you, for example, place your melee guys on these outer corners, it's again literally impossible for them to be hit because the enemy is going to shoot here or the enemy is going to shoot here, and it never hits the melee damage dealers if they are on these sides, while you have these backline things in both corners to just have them waste the abilities. I guess for like showcasing melee damage dealers, you have been using this, right? So if you want to play melee damage, you would usually want to position it here so that the enemy always has either this line or this line, and then these spots, this corner and this corner is usually very safe for your melee damage dealers in those setups. I think we're good to go. You guys know how to position in Illuvium now, and I hope that you can just convert this into pretty much just winning a bunch of games, because if you have a knowledge advantage on this, if you do the correct positioning and the opponent just doesn't really know what's going on, you're just gonna win. It is such a massive deal in this game, and well, you're a genius at it now, so make good use of it. Hope you're gonna win your next ranked games, and see you in the next one.